Hey, it's Gare here asking the question, could a TPK be good for a campaign? Of course, I'm talking here about the sandbox homebrew that I run. And, the short answer to this, the obvious one is, well, no, you're killing the entire party. How could that possibly be good for a campaign? Players have invested in these characters and now they're all dead. But I think actually an argument can be made that if you have a TPK, it can be a good thing under very defined circumstances. Okay. And I did this whole video on avoiding or how do you get around having TPKs, not avoiding them, but, capturing players and then all these solutions so that at least one or two players survive and they can get the other ones back or something like that. But let's just say that circumstances have dictated that the players are in a potential TPK and you're going to roll that out and it's going to happen. Okay. Well, a couple of things. First is, what are the circumstances of that TPK? Very important. And when does it happen in the course of your campaign? Okay. What is happening? Where are the players in your world and level and stuff? So let's do circumstances first. The obvious thing here is that you never, ever, ever just say, I'm going to have a TPK. I'm going to create an encounter that's clearly too hard for these players. And I'm going to just roll it out and the monsters are going to just kill them. That is a bad idea. That is unfair. That is like, why I'm not playing this game so that you just kill me, right? We've talked about the fact that the GM is on the player's side, right? Anytime you can give them a break, typically in a potential TPK situation, you're going to do that. And again, this comes to circumstances too about being on their side, because one, you're never going to just have this TPK. You decided to do that. No. All right. So there's going to be circumstances that cause that. Well, what is it? Because if the players are going along and there is a random monster and you're rolling on a table and that random monster kills them all, that, that seems like, why? Why should that happen? That's where it comes in. You're on their side and some may survive, right? Because a random monster. And so again, if it's just them and they're playing along and they're doing a good job, they know how to run their characters and everything, and they still get killed, I'm probably not a good time for a TPK. It can happen because you've decided, I'm just going to roll the dice. I'm not going to fudge a thing. I'm not going to have these monsters act in a way. They're super hungry trolls or something. But I don't think that's necessarily a good thing for the campaign. It's getting closer. It is getting closer because, as I said, I did a video on balance. You don't need balance. You have an area, my famous swamp of infinite evil, and you go in there, and I'm rolling on a random monster table for the swamp of infinite evil, and boom, something big comes up. They're all dead. Right? I had a group that almost had a TPK recently. They had a Hydra. Wasn't that high of a challenge in terms of the challenge system in their party level. They had no means to cauterize the heads. So every time they would cut these heads off, more would grow. And it quickly became clear we're in serious trouble. And one player was killed permanently. The rest ran away. So this is a situation where it wasn't something on the chart that said, they knew they were in a rough area. Right? So if you're in the swamp of infinite evil and you run into something that your party can't handle, you could be in trouble. And we're getting closer and closer here because of how it's a good thing. Because if the players say, well, the GM isn't going to kill us. He's our friend. He's on our side. So we're just going to fight this thing and see what he does. See how he gets us out of this. And believe me, I've done that, especially if I made a mistake. Because this is back to circumstance. They go into the swamp of infinite evil and they run into a deadly encounter. That's on them. But they're just walking along and I roll up a random monster and I start the battle and I realize I've made a mistake here. This is too deadly for this group. I have to decide what to do. And I have to start bending things to favor the players. But if they think you're always going to do that, you're always going to bend things and we can really push the limit. It's like kids, right? They'll push those limits till you finally say, this is a bridge too far. Now we're getting into the realm, you didn't make a mistake. The players make mistakes in terms of fighting this. One of them, which might be, we are going to assume that the GM isn't going to kill us. So we're just going to go along. We're just going to wade in because you get reckless when you think that. They make bad choices and then finally luck goes against them, right? Because in a game where you're rolling, you can have bad luck. You can have critical hits. by the other side. You can have all sorts of things that happen where suddenly you're in a TPK situation. And you decide as the GM, am I going to intrude here? Am I going, because all these things, they went to the area they shouldn't have, or they're making mistakes, they're acting recklessly. They should have known this thing is deadly. And now they're in a situation where they could not just one or two get killed. And again, people will start to run away too when they see that. But you know how hard it is to desert your fellow player? It's hard. It's really hard. I played with perfect strangers on the internet. We were in TPK type situations and people were not running away. They were hanging in there because it's just the ethos of the game. So now you're in this circumstance where you may have a TPK. And how is that good for the game? Well, before I go into that, clearly, I'm going to also talk about where are you in the game? Because if you have a low-level party that's just starting off, on the very first session, do you want to have a TPK? You know, I don't think so. Yes, they're first level. Yes, they're very vulnerable. We're just checking out your world. We're just kind of taking things in here, and you killed us all? Huh. So no, I would say that wouldn't be good for a campaign. That kind of dampens the enthusiasm for your game. All right, so you're not going to do the first thing. So let's say they get up to like third level if you start at first. Or if you start at third, they're at fourth or fifth. I mean, whatever. But, early stages of the campaign. And the players go somewhere they shouldn't. They make mistakes. There's some bad luck, and you have a TPK, and you decide, okay, I'm going to allow this to happen. We're going to have a TPK. What happens to the players at that point? Well, they realize, KR's world is a serious world. We just got totally wiped out. There are consequences for the things we do. And this is interesting because I had the genesis of this video, which I guess I should have said at the beginning, but if you're this far, you'll see what I'm talking about. On my Discord server, there was a discussion where one of the GMs, I have mostly GMs on my server, talked about, he killed some players and they got captured and they got thrown off this tower. And then other people were talking about situations they had where these guys were on a ship and they got kidnapped and all this kind of stuff. And one of the players said to him, if there's no chance of a TPK, it's not as fun. If I know there's no chance, it's not as fun. And so back to now having said that, what inspired this, let's go back. We've got third level characters. They're went where they shouldn't have gone. They made some mistakes. They had some bad luck. They have a TPK. And they know that's what can happen in your world. We all have to roll up new characters. We have to be more careful. Now, will it kill off the campaign? They're third level, depending on how long your system in a 5e campaign, that doesn't take very long. Pathfinder doesn't take super long. It's a little longer than in 5e. So it depends. In an OSR system, it might take a long time to get to third level, depending on how you do it. But still, they understand this, and we have to be careful. We can get killed in this world, all of us. Okay? And we have to start off with new characters. Now, one of the things that'll happen sometimes when you have a TPK is characters will want to roll up the exact same character they just had. I've seen it. It's my brother or something. They just want to start again. They lose their levels, but they want to start again. But a lot of other players will say, you know what? I don't think I want to run a druid after all. I want to run a monk. I want to run a sorcerer. I want to run something else. So you know what? I'll just start a new character. And I was only third level. See, I wasn't 8th or 9th. I hadn't played with this character for a year. Right. So okay, I'll roll up a new guy. So it's not necessarily going to dampen the enthusiasm. And it's not going to destroy the narrative thrust of your campaign. Because at that third level, fourth, maybe the storylines are developing, but they're not in full force. The players do not have the renown to be part of the world in a way that they are important figures and they're doing all sorts of things. That's not happening yet. So that's an instance where, depending on the circumstances, not your mistake, not you just deciding to do it, but a set of circumstances that make sense, and you're in that stage of the game, a TPK can actually be good for your campaign. Okay. Notice how hard that is to say, because, I knew this topic was going to be, I'm going to people that just say, well, your short answer, okay, turn off the video. That's it. It can't be good. But I'll tell you, you get their attention, that TPK. All right. So now we're moving along in the time period of a campaign. and now you're at 8th, ninth, 10th level. Now, if you're going to have the potential for a TPK, you need to telegraph that big time. They've already potentially had one, or at least, like in my instance, because I really avoid them, but it can happen, but it's rare, right? And I'm only talking about one that could happen with all those circumstances. So it has to be, got to have that bad luck. You got to have all that stuff. Okay. They've already had one. So when you telegraph that this is going to be super deadly, they're going to think this through. Do we want to do this? How do we want to do it? We've really got a plan, and we've got to get an edge on this situation so that we don't risk a TPK. So it really focuses the player. Dr. Johnson, the British writer, famously said, nothing makes a man's tongue looser than the thread of a noose. Oh, he'll talk, right? He's going to get on. So if the players are going to be in trouble, their minds will focus because they know that in the end, we could all die. All right, so you're in 8th, 9th, so you could potentially set up something, but you really got to be careful. Again, you've really got to make it a set of circumstances where this can happen. And then the final thing I would say for a potential TPK, this is also controversial. So if you're in a campaign where you have a big villain, big bad villain, or you have some cataclysmic thing or whatever it is that's happening, you can set this up such that this could be a TPK. This could be the end of the players. It might be the end of the world. It might be whatever. Now, controversial because you may potentially have players that are like, that's end of the world. Let's take that. Let's take that off the table. Although you could just start up a new campaign in another world, I suppose. But the players are going to be defeated by the big bad villain and the TPK. They messed up. Okay. Is that good or is that bad? So that our instinct is to say that is horrific. I would be so disappointed. I would never play that with that GM ever again. But the other instinct is, you know what? We went there. We knew what the odds were. We watched it all unfold. We saw all the rolls. We knew what the abilities were of these creatures, and they beat us fair and square. They defeated us. And the GM didn't pull punches. The GM said, you know what? We're going to do this battle, and we're going to see how it goes. And they presented it in a way that, we understood everything about it that we could. There may have been a few surprises, but it wasn't a surprise that made it unfair, right? Wasn't a thing thrown in where this is dumb. This is just going to kill us. And we rolled it out and we lost. And that threat of losing it all, of getting that TPK when you were this close, it's just like when your team, why do we love sports? Because the outcome is not determined. The best team in the country goes in and some underdog comes along and there's a chance, a small chance, potentially a small chance of this TPK, but there's a chance they can win. And those upsets are what we kind of live for. We're not living for a TPK, but we have that knowledge that, you know what? We gave it our best and it just wasn't our day. But that's what makes those victories sweeter, is knowing that's a possibility. So again, folks, I'm not saying to just kill your players all the time. I'm not saying you should be doing TPKs. They should be rare. But the idea that just out of hand, oh no, you should never have them. You should always fudge things at the end to make them live, isn't necessarily good for your campaign. And a shout out to my Patreon supporters. This week I did Halloween PDF. It was really fun. I'd love to hear your opinion on this. If you've had TPKs, what do you think about them? If you had them as a player, did it ruin everything for you? And of course, like the video, subscribe to my channel. And most importantly, folks, keep playing an RPG game, whichever one you choose, and tell somebody else about it.